Hey everyone! Welcome back! In the last episode, we took a high-level look at the entire financial freedom journey and the steps involved. Today, we're going to dive into the very first stage, and honestly, in my opinion, it's the hardest one. Why? Because, as they say, the hardest part of any journey is taking that first step, the one from your home to the outside world. It's the step where you face your fears, tackle the unknown, and begin your path toward financial independence. If you're new here, let me give you a quick intro. This podcast is all about two main topics. 1. Personal finance and money management skills, because knowing how to manage your money is the key to building wealth. 2. Real-life investment lessons based on years of experience navigating the market. Whether you're just starting out or already on your way to financial freedom, I'm here to share what's worked for me and hopefully help you avoid some of the pitfalls I've learned along the way. Alright, let's dive right into the main topic of today's episode. In this episode, I'll be taking you through the first stage of this financial journey, and the first milestone is the debt stage. Now I know, debt doesn't sound too exciting, but this is actually the starting point for many young people, especially those growing up in Western countries. For many of these young adults, when they graduate, they typically carry a hefty burden of debt. This is because, in Western countries, the culture of independence and self-reliance is ingrained from a very early age. By the time students reach college age, they are often responsible for funding their own education. And since most students at this stage haven't had the chance to build up any savings yet, governments in these countries often have loan programs available to help with college expenses. These loans can be quite substantial. In the US, for example, the average student loan debt is in the tens of thousands. For students attending private colleges, it can be even higher. In Australia, the government's social welfare policies are a bit more generous, so students may get more support, but the debts are still significant and can follow them for many years. For many of these students, the day they pay off their student loans is a big milestone in life. It's a huge achievement, and it marks a special moment because it's often a long road to being debt-free. In Vietnam, however, most students don't have to worry about these kinds of debts due to cultural differences. Unless in cases of extreme financial hardship, parents here typically fund their children's college education. So, when you graduate, even if you're starting from scratch, you're at least starting from zero, not from a negative balance like in some Western countries. In other words, in Vietnam, the first milestone in the financial journey is much simpler and less complicated. You may be starting without any savings, but you're not burdened by the massive debts that can weigh down young people in other parts of the world. It can take many years for students abroad to pay off their education loans before they can truly start building wealth. But here, the financial journey begins with a much lighter starting point. Later on, I'll go into more detail about this debt phase and how it impacts your journey, but for now, just understand that managing this stage of your financial life is crucial in setting the foundation for the future. Now let's move on to the second milestone, the dependence on family phase. Now, everyone has gone through this stage. It's the phase when you can't fully support yourself yet and are still relying on your parents. Personally, I think it's perfectly okay to stay in this phase until you're about 18 years old. That's when, legally, you're allowed to start working, although technically, you can start working at 15 in many places. But just for fun, let's say 18, right? Now, in rural areas, there are kids as young as 9 or 10 who already have to start working to help their families. It's really sad, and I'm definitely not saying we should expect kids to start working that young. I still believe that during this stage, if possible, you should focus on your studies. However, what I want to emphasize here is that simply having the opportunity to be supported by your family until the age of 18 is a privilege compared to many other people around the world. So, I believe that by 18, it's time to start standing on your own 2 feet. If you decide to go to college, then sure, you can stretch it for an additional 4 years. But even if you're in college, ideally, you should aim to support yourself by working part-time. At the very least, you should aim to reduce your dependence on others, contributing to your own living expenses. The important part is that when you start working, not only do you have money to support yourself, but you also gain an invaluable lesson that ties directly to what we're talking about today, the value of money. Let me share a quick story with you. Back when I was in Australia, I had an employee named Silent, a young guy who was just 23 years old at the time. He had recently finished college and applied for a job in my company. There were other candidates with better qualifications, but I decided to hire him because his attitude stood out. Fast forward a few years, and now, at just 26, he manages a team of almost 20 people. I truly believe he'll go far. Now, let me get back to the story. Silent told me that when he was 15, he worked at a fast food restaurant, earning $15 an hour. In Australia, that was a relatively low wage, but it was during that time working part-time that he began to understand the true value of money. I remember him telling me that when he went to buy a coffee, he realized that the cost of one coffee was equivalent to an hour of his work. That realization led him to stop buying coffee from cafes. Instead, he started brewing his own coffee at home. What I'm trying to highlight with this story is that there are things you don't notice when you're being supported by others, but once you start earning your own money, you understand how hard it is to make it. And from that point, you start respecting and appreciating money more. This is the foundation for building your financial journey. So, during these years, whether you're earning a little or a lot, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're working. By doing so, you'll accumulate a lot of valuable experience and knowledge that will benefit you later in life. Looking back, you'll be proud of yourself for standing on your own feet, especially when you realize that you've already taken the first steps toward financial independence. To wrap up, in my personal opinion, we are allowed to rely on others until we're 18. Ideally, by the time you turn 22, you should have already transitioned into the next stage, being fully self-sufficient. And that brings us to the third milestone in our financial journey. Now, when you reach this stage, it means you've reached a point where you can make money to support yourself. This is a very important stage because it's like the point where you go from not knowing how to swim to knowing how to swim. Before, if you didn't know how to swim and had no one to support you, you'd struggle. But once you pass this milestone, you don't need anyone to hold you up. You can swim on your own and survive without outside help. Now, here's the kicker. If, let's say, tomorrow, your family lost everything and no one was there to financially support you, you'd still be able to survive. And if you play your cards right, you might even be able to take care of others too. But at the very least, you'd be able to take care of yourself. However, there are still some risks at this stage. If you're not careful, it's easy to fall back not just to step 2, but even to step 1, back into debt. This is a trap that many people fall into, thinking they're financially secure, only to find themselves getting careless with money. It's crucial to stay disciplined in this stage, building good financial habits like budgeting, saving, and investing. Without this discipline, you might find yourself right back in financial trouble, repeating the cycle. At this stage, it's all about maintaining financial stability. You've moved beyond relying on others, but you need to be smart about how you manage your money to avoid slipping backward. Keep building on this foundation, stay proactive, and keep pushing forward on your journey to financial freedom. So, here's why I bring this up. The reason I say this is because in the dependence on family stage, you rarely need to borrow money. It's not that it never happens, but it's quite rare. However, once you move into the stage where you're earning your own money, that's when you get used to spending. If you don't have a plan to manage your spending, and you fall into the trap of buying things you don't really need, combined with the mindset of, I'm working now, I'll be able to pay it off later, it's very easy to slip into debt. Now, I'm not talking about good debt versus bad debt yet. There's a whole concept of good debt, but I'll go into more detail in the later episodes. In this case, though, nearly 100% of the debt you're incurring is bad debt. And when it's bad debt, it's a real struggle. The quality of your life drops significantly when you're in debt. The ideal scenario is when you owe money to friends or family, and they don't charge you interest. But even in those cases, you're still living with the stress of having to pay it back. Most people in debt are living paycheck to paycheck, spending whatever they earn, sometimes not even enough to cover all their expenses. And because they're not saving or planning ahead, they have to borrow money to make ends meet. But when that happens, there's often no surplus left to actually pay off the debt. So, you end up borrowing more just to pay off the existing debt, and that cycle keeps going. You end up in a situation where you're constantly promising, "I'll pay you back next month," but never really managing to break free. The real problem with this is you lose something far more valuable than just money: your credibility. Your credibility is incredibly important in life. When we're young, we don't pay much attention to this, but as we get older, we realize just how much losing your credibility can hurt. In cases like these, people often end up owing money to multiple people, and eventually, they might find themselves in a position where they have to hide from their creditors. That's when you lose your integrity, and that's a much bigger issue. Once you lose your integrity, the consequences can be huge. And on top of that, you might also lose something even more important that you might not even realize at the time. You lose people who genuinely care about you. Typically, only people who truly care about you are willing to lend you money without charging interest. But those people are rare, and losing them is something you don't want to experience. Now, let's talk about another form of debt, debt with interest, and the best case of this kind of debt is bank debt. Banks are rich in resources, and one of their main sources of income comes from charging interest. Personal loans or credit card debt are examples of this kind of debt. The interest rates on these types of debt can be very high. For example, the average interest rate on credit cards can range from 2 to 4% per month. Now, that might not sound like much at first, but when you calculate it, it's actually a huge amount. Let me give you a comparison to put this into perspective. If you deposit your money in a 12-month term deposit, you might get an interest rate of around 5%. Compared to the interest you pay on credit cards, that's about 6 times lower. And if we compare it to higher yield investment options, like stock market investments, the difference can be as high as 10 times. Now let's consider another example, the stock market. Stocks typically offer higher returns, but with more risk. Over time, the average return from the stock market can range from 10% to 15% per year, but even a 15% return is considered very good. This is compared to the 30 to 40% interest you might pay on credit cards, which is much higher than the returns from safer investments like savings accounts, or even the stock market. I hope by now, you're starting to see how dangerous this high-interest debt is. And that's just with bank loans. When we're talking about payday loans or loan sharks, those interest rates are much worse. Some of these loans calculate interest daily, not monthly or yearly. The people who lend money like this are masters at applying pressure, and your life will feel like an unrelenting cycle of stress. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to paint too negative a picture for anyone dealing with debt, but I'm going over this in detail to help you understand the real consequences of bad debt. By understanding these consequences, you'll be motivated to break free from the cycle of debt. In the upcoming episodes, I'll share with you some strategies for gradually getting out of debt in the most effective way possible. Let's return to the third stage we're talking about, which is the stage where we start working and receiving a monthly paycheck, meaning you can support yourself. This is the stage most young people are currently in, and in many cases, a lot of people get stuck here, living like this for the rest of their lives. And it's not just in Western countries, especially in the US. The lifestyle of living paycheck to paycheck can make your life feel incredibly insecure. If something unexpected happens, or if you suddenly need to spend a large amount of money, or even worse, if you lose your income source, things can get pretty serious, fast. This is why in the US, people are often very afraid of losing their jobs. Many people work their whole lives in one job without ever building up savings, and they're afraid to change jobs because of the pressure of living paycheck to paycheck. It limits your freedom and makes it hard to do anything else. This lifestyle can feel very restricting and is a big reason why people get stuck in this loop. This is also why I categorize these stages: debt, dependence on family, and even being able to support yourself, as part of a stressful and uncertain phase. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a fact that many people remain stuck in step 3 for their entire lives. These individuals live paycheck to paycheck, spending everything they earn and, in some cases, even accumulating more debt as they go along. This reality can be very tough to break free from. Now, I really hope that for those of you following along with these podcasts, you've gained at least a bit of insight so you don't end up stuck at step 3. To avoid this, when you reach the 3rd stage, it's crucial to have a plan in place for the next steps, and quickly move to the next phase. I call it the tracking and building phase. In upcoming episodes, I'll dive deeper into how to effectively track your expenses and, most importantly, how to get out of debt as quickly as possible. For today, I'm going to wrap up this episode. If you found the information in this episode useful, please share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode.